Join us today for this webinar. My name is Tiffany O'Shaughnessy. I'm currently the past chair of the Division 17 ECP Committee. We are a 9-member board that's tasked with creating a home base for ECPs in Division 17, Society of Counseling Psychology, and we foster networking, facilitate leadership, and support the professional development of all counseling psych ECPs. And this specific webinar is part of the current chair, Dr. Melanie Lance's initiative this year focused on helping to demystify the process of getting involved in SCP and APA leadership. We're trying to help any ECP who wants to have an active role in the division or association be successful in connecting. So in this webinar, you're going to be able to learn and ask questions about EPA's governance structure, the roles and social benefits of many of its boards and committees, and effective nominations processes that can lead you to serve. And it's going to all be coming from our very qualified presenter, Dr. Eddie Amin, who you can see on your screen now. Dr. Amin is the Associate Executive Director of the Office on Graduate Students and Early Career Affairs at the American Psychological Association. Previously, he was the Director of the Office on ECPs, and before that, the Assistant Director of APAGs, so a long history with this organization. He graduated from the University of Miami. He's a fellow counseling psychologist. He's the National Board Chair of Stand Up for Kids, a homeless youth organization providing street outreach and other services in 17 U.S. cities. And he just retired after 5 years as leader of a local coalition of LGBT youth advocates, which successfully advocated to ban conversion therapy, hooray, improve K-12 health education standards, require suicide prevention training of school personnel, and require LGBT cultural competency training of all DC healthcare providers. So I'm going to turn it over to Eddie shortly, but I wanted to let you know that because this is a webinar format, everyone can't chime in verbally, but if you have questions as we move through this presentation, and particularly we're going to reserve at least the last 20 minutes for questions. So you can submit them to me by typing in the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. You should see that on your screen, and I will facilitate a Q&A session at the end of Dr. Amin's talk. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Amin, who's going to talk to you all about the how and why of getting involved in APA leadership.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining in, and thank you to Division 17 and Tiffany and to Melanie in particular for helping make sure that this webinar happens. I hope to provide you as much information as you'll find helpful. There is, after having been here for close to 7 years at APA, I still find that there is more information in this sea of knowledge at APA than I could ever possibly absorb. So I'm hoping to give you the right dose of information. Some of you may have tried to get into APA leadership in the past and have been successful or not successful. And some of you might just be thinking about the possibility of getting involved in APA. So I'll try to cover a number of different options here and keep my information relatively brief so that way we can get into a good amount of Q&A later. Again, I'm really delighted to be here, and I hope that from this webinar you'll be able to think more critically about how you can best serve in the association. The message I want to begin with is hopefully one that I will end with as well, which is that APA very much needs early career psychologists to be its guiding voice in the future. I joke with the Committee on ECPs that we really need ECPs to take over the association. And I'm pretty public with that feeling. It hasn't gotten me fired yet. I think there is a recognition that APA is successful lately at attracting early career psychologists, and the more ECPs that we put into leadership positions, the better we'll be positioned to make sure that the organization, the discipline, the field, and the public are benefiting from the cutting edge of our training and the ways that we view the world. So with that message, you are needed. Sometimes the demand outpaces the number of positions that are available, but slowly that is changing as well. All right, so I'm going to cut out my video so we can so I can stop looking at myself and share my screen with you. Let's see, here we go. And I'll put the video back on for the Q&A. All right, so this is the how and why of getting into APA leadership. I've put my email address here. It's eamin@apa.org, and I encourage you to reach out to me as soon as you would like to. If there's a question that we couldn't get to today, or save this email address for the future, closer to the time that you might be considering applying for a position. just to get off on the foot with some of you that are probably in counseling psychology programs or have the legacy of attending a counseling psychology doctoral program. I was very fortunate too. I think it was by luck that I ended up in a counseling psych program, because I started out looking at both clinical and counseling, and really happy. I went to the University of Miami. The dean of our graduate school, Isaac Prolotensky, is an eminent community psychologist, and he says very simply that social justice to him means to each person their dues. And a lot of our training was grounded in the principles of social justice as well as the practices of it. And I was inspired in graduate, although I was never involved actively in divisions or in APA when I was in graduate school. I was very involved in community work, specifically around homelessness, inspired by this quote here, which is also from Isaac Prolotensky: "We must foreground the need for local activism when inequities exist in the scholar's own backyard." Living in DC, having the National Mall as my backyard, has only reinforced how important it is to make sure that I'm giving my skills away. And a lot of people do this by volunteering for division leadership and APA leadership. Of course, if you choose not to do that, I hope to inspire you to at least put the great skill sets and talents that you have as a psychologist to use wherever you find it most needed. Again, when I was in grad school, I had an opportunity to volunteer with a homeless youth organization. And I had a major change of thought when I was reading this book that talked about how people moved into advocacy from direct service roles. And the author is describing this interview that he had with somebody who was young, maybe straight out of college, volunteering at a soup kitchen. And that person said, I hope this soup kitchen is here for when my grandchildren are ready to volunteer, because I think this is such a phenomenal opportunity. And I don't know if you're chuckling to yourself. There's a problem when we want the soup kitchen to stay around. There is a problem when we want to build more shelter instead of look at some of the systemic issues that are displacing people and causing homelessness. So I was really impressed by Mary Beth Shin, a psychologist in '92, who asked this question: what is a psychologist to do? And I don't want to answer that question right now. I think it's worth a lifetime of pondering and a lifetime of commitment. I'm not saying that homelessness might be your cause, but whatever that is, I hope that you always ask yourself, what is a psychologist to do about this cause that I'm passionate about? A couple of other things to just frame this talk before we dive into the specifics about APA are for you to ask not what job do you want, but which problems do you wish to solve in the world. I think if you substitute the word job for which committee role do I want, which leadership position do I want to spend hours on end involved in, it might be constructive to start from that larger place of asking what makes you passionate and which problems do you hope to address in the world at this point in your career. And then I'm always inspired by this. I'm passing it on to you. It's not what you can do with your degree. It's what you can do with all your skills, experiences, knowledge, and education. I think we are in quite a privileged place to have doctoral degrees behind us. And I am just thankful that you're giving some time to learn about how to put that more into service. This webinar dovetails really nicely with an initiative of a current APA president, Dr. Jessica Henderson Daniel. She has as her core initiative this year the APA Citizen Psychologist Initiative. It comes from this belief that psychology is every way, every day. She says psychologists must be in the room at the table and at the head of the table when policies are formulated and implemented. So, and this is to award not necessarily folks that are involved in APA or division leadership, but folks that are getting involved in decisions that are happening in their communities. Those communities could be local advisory neighborhood groups, or city councils, or state boards of education, or in federal politics, or federal issues or national boards or so forth. So psychologists are getting out there, getting involved in organizations. She wants to kind of first find out how many of us there are. If you're an APA member, you've probably seen a survey go out asking for a baseline understanding of citizen psychologists, as well as a call for nominations for people to self-nominate or nominate others that are doing this work. So a citizen psychologist is one who has been engaged in activities to improve the lives of people in their communities. These activities can include public service, volunteerism, board membership, and other strategic roles which are not directly associated with one's day-to-day job as a practitioner, scientist, or educator. It's a new concept and one that we hope will stay around for many years. Again, the goals are to educate the public about how psychology contributes to policies that improve our communities, provide learning objectives and educational materials to educate people at all stages about how to become a citizen psychologist, and of course, award presidential citations to exemplary citizen psychologists. I'm sure there will be counseling psychologists among these ranks. If you're interested in learning more, though, about this in particular, check out apa.org/citizen. Before I talk about APA, I also just have one slide on how ECPs are represented across our divisions. From a survey that my office did last year, we found out that 7 presidents of divisions, APA's got 54 divisions, 7 presidents are early career psychologists. 58% of divisions have an early career committee, and usually those groups serve as a leadership pipeline. So people get involved perhaps as a committee member, then perhaps take on a leadership role in that committee, and then get involved in other leadership areas in their divisions, and perhaps branch out from there and consider APA involvement or involvement in other associations. 30% of divisions have a voting seat for ECPs on the governing board. We would like to see that 100%, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Half of divisions have a board that has at least 25% or more ECPs, so that's really promising. Here at APA, as of last year, we had 17,000 early career psychologist members. An ECP is defined as somebody from 0 to 10 years out of grad school. So last year, through all the way through 2007, you would have been considered an ECP. If we look at the age demographics, we can see that the majority of ECPs are 35 to 44 years old. But I think what's important to remind other folks is that our demographics are not monolithic. We have a number of early career psychologists that are coming into psychology from a different career, or perhaps they delayed going to graduate school for some period of time. So we think about being an early career psychologist not as a matter of youthfulness, but as a matter of being at the forefront or at the vanguard of our career trajectory. We are largely a white group, but promisingly, ECPs are more diverse than mid and senior career psychologists, and graduate students who will soon be ECPs show more diversity than ECPs. So the trend is in the direction of greater representation from folks of color. 34% of ECPs with PhDs are teaching in 4-year schools. 53% are serving the poor frequently. So just a couple of things to kind of help characterize who is this group. At APA, the Committee on Early Career Psychologists requested that a policy be instituted a few years back that there be an ECP on every board and committee, with just a few exceptions. So that has been a process of transforming boards and committees to be to either hold specific slates for an early career psychologist in an election process, or to make sure that ECPs were being recruited and being highly favored in the recruitment processes if there wasn't a specific slate. Thanks to the work of CECP and a lot of allies, especially allies on our Council of Representatives, we were really able to move that policy requests forward in a quick manner, and we've seen a lot of ECPs as a result join the ranks of governance. It's an exciting time to be at APA. As a staff member and as a member of APA, I've seen a number of changes in senior management and leadership here. Arthur Evans is our newest CEO, and he joined APA last spring. It's hard to believe he's almost been here for a year. But he's pushing APA to get outside of the traditional spaces where we find ourselves and show up at the tables along the lines of what Jessica Daniel is thinking. Show up at the tables and demonstrate how psychology is important to solving and addressing a lot of the problems that are on the front page of every day of every newspaper. So I think that things are headed in the right direction, and ECP voices are critically needed. So I've had up on the screen for a while some of APA's strategic goals. These will be shifting in the next year as we rewrite our strategic plan. Hopefully it will result in APA being more responsive and more nimble. ECPs are definitely needed to shape that plan because we are the ones that are going to be inheriting this association after our mid and senior career psychologists move up the ranks and into retirement. So APA, just broadly speaking, is a nonprofit organization. The IRS tax code to be down in the weeds is 501c3. That means we are not for profit, and we must have a limit on our lobbying efforts. Forgive the typo there. We cannot spend more than $1 million a year on our lobbying efforts, and everything that we do must be documented. Because we are a 501c3, our mission is not to support political giving and advocacy for practicing psychologists. That comes from our companion organization called the APA Practice Org, or the APAPO. That is, it has the same board of directors, the same CEO as the APA that you know, but people are invited to pay a practice assessment and to help support specific interests that can only happen under the 501c6 side of APA. Most boards and committees that are available for people to serve on will be on the 501c3 side, the nonprofit side. What you see now is a very complicated organizational chart. This is not to confuse you, but just to say that APA has got a lot of moving parts and a lot of different major offices or directorates. Let's see if, I'm not sure if my mouse will show up here, but let me try here. The offices that I help oversee are over here. The Office on Early Career Psychologists and the APAG's office. So my boss would be Nancy Moore. This is the CEO. You'll see that you could find a lot of interesting boards and committees that work closely with the Education Directorate. A lot of people get involved in psychology in the first place because of the work or the issues that are covered in this group here, the Public Interest Directorate. So for each of these different offices at APA, there's a corresponding committee. For example, a committee on ethnic minority affairs, a committee on health disparities, a committee on women in psychology, a committee on SES. We also have the practice directorate. A lot of these groups are on the 501c6 side. And then, of course, the science directorate here. So APA is a vast organization. I think we have over 550 employees. We probably have easily that many people involved in APA governance as well. The flip side of what I just showed you, which is staff-led, is our governance structure and our reporting lines. So APA is a member-driven organization. That's why membership is on top here. There is a subset of members who serve sort of in a UN-like space. They're called the Council of Representatives. The Council of Representatives has a member from every division in APA, as well as the state psychological associations from both the US and from the provincial associations from Canada, and our territories as well. So those each of those groups sends at least one representative to council. Council meets twice a year in Washington, D.C. They're meeting next weekend, and they determine things by majority vote. And they set the policy at APA. There's a smaller subset of folks that manage the day-to-day affairs of the organization, a much smaller group called the Board of Directors. They're given budgetary oversight by council, the Council of Representatives. There are a number of big boards at APA. These are all in the boxes here. And each of these boards, if you wish to serve on one, will receive your applications by Friday, by March 2nd. And take your applications, check with you if you were nominated by somebody else to see if you're actually still interested. Those boards will then meet and determine, based on the number of open positions that they'll have in 2019, how many positions there are, and then how many people to slate. I think it's 3 people per open seat get slated, and they're usually rank ordered. That list goes to the Council of Representatives. So this group determines or votes one person for each slate that was submitted to it from all of these groups. Voting doesn't happen until the fall. So if you run for a position and you get your nomination in by this Friday, service won't begin until January 1, and you might not find out the status of your election until November. Not all boards and committees, though, operate through a council election process. The groups down here, a lot of the groups down here with a few exceptions. And can you, if we look at the Committee on ECPs, for example, that's the one that I'm most familiar with. This is a 7-member group, and the CECP does a call for nominations due late August, and it will usually on a telephone call determine its list of finalists by September. And because CECP reports directly to the Board of Directors, that is our parent board, the Board of Directors will receive the slates and look at the candidates that we've identified and confirm the appointments. So we might have 3 openings and submit 9 names. The Board of Directors will return to us a list of the 3 names, 1 for each slate, that it would like us to have on the committee. Most terms of service are 3 years. I think the Council of Editors is a 7-year commitment. I know CECP is 3 years for sure. But this process, this uniform process of council elections, is different than the idiosyncratic processes of a lot of these other groups. There is an internal movement that I'm involved in to try to help streamline over a few-year process the deadlines for all these other groups. But for now, your best bet is to look at the APA website and to reach out to the committees that you might be interested in to find out when their process is. We're also in the process of collecting that information for ECPs, and we'll post it on our listservs and on our website momentarily. But I think I went through this already. There's the Council of Representatives. That's the legislative body at APA. Full power and authority over the affairs and funds of the association. Power to review the actions of any board, committee, divisions, or affiliated orgs. The Board of Directors this year has an ECP. It is Leandra Clark-Harvey. She is the first ECP member of the Board of Directors that is specifically serving on an ECP seat. She had previously served in the Committee on ECPs. So we're glad to have representation in both the council and on the board. Last year on council, there were 8 ECPs. I'm waiting for the roster to determine how many folks are ECPs this year, and I can only hope that that number has grown. But ECPs represented only 5% on council last year, and about the same percentage the year before. That's a problem when we want ECPs to have an expanded voice. We are 17,000 members. Clearly, we can increase our size to be even larger on council. But that happens in your division homes and in your state association homes. You need to tell your governing body that you're interested in serving on council and find out those idiosyncratic processes for it to happen, so they can send your name forward. APA, as I mentioned on the org chart, has a number of standing boards and committees and continuing committees. For the purposes of this webinar, it's not so important to know the difference. But boards and committees, as a whole, are charged with policy development or carrying out specific business of the association. For example, to approve sponsors of continuing education, to do the work of accreditation by reviewing sites that are applying for accreditation or re-accred, as well as setting the policies of accreditation. The only group that can develop policy at APA is the Council of Representatives, but boards and committees are informing Council all the time about policy through recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, CECP proposed that there be an ECP on every board and committee, and it became policy when APA's Council of Reps voted that policy in place. So as I mentioned, serving on council, if I could get a few of you to consider running for a council position, I will have done my job. From the survey that I mentioned earlier of divisions, 71% of divisions believe that an ECP would be welcome to run for a council seat from that division in the future. So these divisions that said yes are helping to combat ageism and are open to that idea, and I think will probably benefit from the grassroots movement of ECPs pushing them to enlighten how that process happens and how they can best make use of ECP talent. We put together a fantastic video, a whiteboard video, called Serving on APA's Council of Representatives. We do kind of a composite sketch. We interviewed a number of ECPs, including your Division 17 ECP member, and put the sketch together to tell you the how and why of serving on the Council of Representatives. So if you go to the Early Career website and click on Hall of Knowledge, you can get to this, and hopefully it answers some of the questions that I won't be able to get to right now. CECP is often a popular place for ECPs to get involved in APA governance if they never have before. It's a 7-member group that represents the unique interests and concerns of ECPs. We report to the APA board. For example, we're advising the board right now on the direction that we want it to take regarding the ECPP Step 2 and how it conducts its business with ASPPB. So the board looks to us and to CECP for advice and leadership on some key issues that are affecting this generation and this developmental stage in terms of the profession. And the committee is very busy helping informing larger agenda items, resources, putting on a ton of programming for convention, giving out money to help people get to convention, doing some research. Some of you who are ECP members will see a couple of surveys come out soon, asking you about your attitudes and experiences on postdoc and on specialty pathways. So CECP is one area where you can get involved. I believe there will be 2 seats opening, and applications are due in late August, as I mentioned. We also have on our website, and I really encourage you to type this into your browser and bookmark it for the future. We put together a really cool set of tools to help you navigate through a complicated governance process. There is a much better webinar, if I do say so myself, than the one I'm leading today, because it is by experts, folks that have figured out how to get into APA leadership as an ECP. That's something that I never did, so I've only picked it up secondhand. So there's that webinar. There's a guide on the nomination process, specifically how to get nominated for a position that council might ultimately decide your fate on, getting elected, and then some tips from fellow leaders. So this is going to be a good site for you to have in your back pocket as you navigate. And we've got some materials that we're finalizing in the next few weeks to put up on that website. So bookmark it and do come back to it. If we're thinking that you might want to take some time before you get involved in APA leadership, but you do want to increase your advocacy or your leadership skills and put those to use in other places, for me that's a win. I think the more ECPs that are involved in changing the world, not necessarily at APA, but everywhere, we're going to be in a better place. So these two links will give you advocacy skills, this one here, and this one here is a new page that went live just the other day, which compiles a number of articles, webinars, and other assorted resources to help you increase your leadership skills. One thing that you can do right now is tell your story about public service loan forgiveness. The federal government has it on the chopping block, and unfortunately, graduate students have always fared pretty poorly when Congress has to decide where to cut. They usually protect community college and four-year college students and penalize graduate students. So we need to get out there and tell them why the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is critical to our careers and to the public. So we know that students graduate with debt. If you're a PhD student getting a clinical counseling or school degree, this is your median debt. If you're a clinical counseling school student getting a PsyD, this is your median debt. We cannot do the kinds of work that our public needs without some of these benefits like public service loan forgiveness. So that is all I have. I'm going to come back and turn on my video. And hopefully there's some questions that have come through, or comments, observations, things that you need me to go over in greater detail.
Yes, thank you, Eddie, for all that really great information at the start. And I want to encourage everyone, if you do have questions or tips or things you want to share, go ahead and type them into the Q&A box, and I'll keep reading them as they come in. I know one question is, you'd mentioned the nomination process so it's this coming Friday, so probably people who have not prepared that, it's probably for next year more, but maybe some of you are already in that process. And it looks like we have a question about the nomination process. So there's the self-nomination. Is it also useful to get nominations from other places? What do you know how that works with how many nominations one should get for running for a board?
So most boards and committee, so you will move forward to being reviewed by that board and committee to which you applied. If you just have one nomination. So anyone who's applied, as long as they confirm that they're still willing, let's say that Tiffany, you nominated me. Well, the elections office would call me and say, hey, Tiffany nominated you, are you interested? I could opt out at that point and say, no, that's a mistake, I'm humbled, but no. I could say, that's great, I told her to. 5 other people could also nominate me, and I could self-nominate. Whether it's just one individual or 6 nominations that come through, the board or committee is going to see that nomination or see that candidate is interested. They will have more material to look at, clearly, if more people have nominated that individual. But in some cases, the additional nominations may not weigh as much as you think that they might. I think once you get before the board or committee, they're going to be looking at the experiences that you've had in leadership or on the issues relevant to that board or committee's work. And so I think that's where someone's statement and their CV come into play.
Okay, so the additional nominations piece.
Yeah, so be optimistic even if you just have yourself standing behind you. This webinar falls after the Valentine's Day deadline that we had for people to request a letter of CECP. But if you're thinking about this maybe 330 days from now, so not a full year from now, but like in January, and you want to get into the nomination process for one of those big boards or committees, reach out to CECP or me or another staff member in our offices to help kickstart that process. CECP does want to support ECPs across the board getting involved, and we'll take the information that you send us and write our own nice letters of recommendation to give to those boards and committees.
Okay. And was that, I saw that call go out. Is that a highly utilized thing? Do a lot of people seek those letters of support, or?
It was more utilized this year than last year, and this year I think the committee will end up submitting 9 letters.
Oh.
And it really is a big range in terms of the groups that people are interested in and running for.
Sure, yeah. And then you had mentioned that you're trying to get more ECPs involved in council is a step, but that's controlled by the state boards and by the divisions. Is there, I know there's that website you gave out of kind of ways to kind of advocate, but is there any advice you have about, like say you're in one of the divisions? I know our division definitely has it. I see Candace Hargans is on the call now. She's on our ECP committee. And so we, 17 does already have an ECP, so there's precedent for that. But I know there was some that weren't. Was there any advice that you've heard about how to have those conversations or how to position yourself to kind of be in or to challenge some of those ideas that council is for people who have been in the organization for 50 years or whatever?
Wow. So I think first you have to take the temperature of division leadership because they will help determine whose names get put forward. And it is the case that there is a vast willingness to move the needle and get more ECPs in. But I think in some cases there is a prevailing sense that you have to earn your stripes. And you might not be able to do that for decades in some folks' eyes. So to overcome that, I think take the temperature, talk about what you bring to the table and how that might be different than perhaps the modal council member. Ask them what it would take for you to be a serious nominee by that division or by that state associations. So I think those conversations, those early conversations are critical. And I wish we could unmute Candace, but Candace, if you have any advice that we haven't got to and you want to write something in the chat box, I'll happily read it to everybody.
I know one of the things that Candace had talked about, I think, hopefully I'm not misquoting, or that we've talked about a lot in the ECP committee on 17 is how much name recognition plays a role in getting voted, because council rep is usually something voted on by the membership. And so just in general, running for things, even if you might not get it within your division, the name recognition helps. And I know some other people that are on our committee, they've volunteered for some of the more thankless tasks. Like one that is really useful is a listserv moderator, because then all of a sudden your name is on a couple emails a day that come out. And so that tends to be, I know early on I did like newsletter. I did the newsletter for the section on college and university counseling centers within 17. And then that led to kind of moving up slowly in these things. So kind of doing something that me as an EC, if I've got a little bit of web stuff, I've got a little bit of something that was helpful. So I think those things were kind of helpful in getting the name recognition piece that can be really hard for overcoming like a barrier to getting into council. It's really hard when it's your name versus like one of the largest names in the field. Like everyone knows that person, they're going to vote for that person. So.
I'm glad that you shared that. And I think that there are humble ways to serve. You know, on my own board outside of APA, it's really tough to fill the secretary role. I think somehow the word secretary has a stigma associated with it. But I think it's an incredible way to be a part of the executive committee, to be closer to the decision making process, and absolutely, yeah, listserv moderator might seem thankless. It also might be very gratifying to be kind of the first to the know as things come through, but it can certainly be part of the pathway that gets you out there. I encourage people to not be dispirited if running the first or the second time turns out unfavorable. I think you can best arm yourself, or I should say, best equip yourself with the knowledge that it could be a 2 or 3 year game before you get in. But during that time, there are other things that you can do to effectively serve the discipline. And I think any way that you do so is valuable. But there are, unfortunately, just a maximum number of spots. And even if ECPs occupied every spot in APA governance, there would still be a major shortage based on the demand.
For sure, yeah. And we just got some feedback from Dr. Harguns. She said, you said exactly what I was going to say around those things, but making sure that the work you do in your current service roles is excellent. And I definitely agree with that. I think that what you said, the secretary roles, it is often one that folks don't step into. I know in the Association for Women in Psychology, we renamed it the recorder correspondent or communication sort of thing. So it didn't have that connotation that sometimes people have of, yeah, sometimes there's some gender bias things that come in there, or just expectations. So, but doing that, and then doing that to the best of your ability, and really showing up for that, and fulfilling it as much as you can, really helps people want to have you on other committees or think of you when that comes in. And then she also said, use your unique skills to extend or enhance the role, so that your ability to contribute is unmistakable. So using your voice in those ways, and I think that speaks to what you said, Eddie, about the importance of having ECPs at the table too. Like when you're at the table, using your voice while you're there too.
Yes. Yep. And I appreciate Candace's emphasis on this excellence and this unmistakable contribution. Your time is, being an ECP means your time is probably limited. You're probably thinking about, you put some things on hold for all those years of graduate education, maybe a postdoc, and so now you're ready to kind of live life fully. You might have a bigger paycheck. You might have a partner or a family in tow, and you might be taking on bigger financial burdens. So with that, if you don't have the time to do a faithful job of service to APA or to a division or elsewhere, that's okay. I think it's important to recognize where you've reached your limits. I imagine the fact that you're giving an hour of your time today means that you do want to learn how to do this process and undoubtedly do it well. And to be recognized, I think there are things that do make people stand out amongst a pool of excellent leaders. And I think that is commitment. Like, I'll say I'm going to do this, and I actually do it. I also make decisions. Instead of, I guess, practicing that counseling skill, like of open-endedness, right? At least I've come to value folks that are like, okay, I've heard these opinions. I think the decision and the path forward is this. Don't be a leader that just volleys things back to the other people to decide. Try to take some ownership of some of the projects and ideas and the questions and the conundrums that are coming before you.
I like that, really emphasizing one. I think you said if you can be faithful in your role of service, so being able to really complete that, but then also, yeah, taking ownership of that role and making some decisions and following through with those things. I think, yeah, I think the service positions where we're just deflecting and kind of kicking the ball down the road, seeing, oh, we'll get there. It is very helpful when you try something, you commit to something, you actually do that. And then that also, if that's successful, and again, more people want, like, wow, that was really helpful. We did something. Let's have this person be on these other things as well. I would say you'd mentioned the getting involved in divisional leadership piece, and I don't see any more questions yet. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them over here, and we'll be sure to ask Eddie. But I know one of the things that some people don't know is that every year a new president comes in, they have a bunch of positions they need to fill, just appointed positions. So you don't have to run for something, there's appointments. And oftentimes the presidents don't want to just put in people that they know, but they end up doing that because they run out of people to ask. They're not quite sure who's available. And so for any of you that are wanting to get involved, like an appointed position is a really great way to start. I know I early on just sent an email to a president of Division 17 I didn't know, and so I graduated, I would like to serve, and they put me on a CE committee. And so that was great. I did that, it was cool, but I had no, because they always have all of these positions or special task groups or things that they need to fill.
Yeah, I just saw a question.
Yeah. Are those appointed positions typically posted? No. Not in the past. I haven't really seen that. It's more, sometimes they might, but I think it depends on the president. And so really it is a reaching out when a new person gets elected saying, hey, if you have any unfilled positions, let me know. For the most part, I have not seen sometimes they might say, I've got to fill all these ones, reach out to me if you're interested. It might come on a presidential announcement. But usually they don't necessarily post that. They're just trying their best to figure out where to pull people from. Unless, Eddie, if you have another perspective on that.
I think that could be true. I mean, I am working with Dr. Daniel and her presidential initiative, and she filled her working group, the Citizen Psychologist working group, with some folks by word of mouth. So there wasn't kind of an open call to serve. So that's an example here at APA. For board and committee seats, whether you're appointed by a parent board or elected by a council, those are all posted. And if you don't mind, I can share my screen again and just show you where on the APA website you can find this information.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. I will share, let's see. Just give me one moment. Okay, so here I'm at, well, actually, let's start from scratch. Let's go to apa.org, click About APA, and then click Governance. You'll see two key places if you want to serve on a board or committee. This link here, this will take you to all of the boards and committees and their pages. If you click a board or committee, you will see who the current members are. You can see what the groups have been up to. You can see their call for nominations. Oftentimes that you'll find that there at the committee landing page. And these are the staff liaisons. These are folks like me that work closely with a specific group on a daily basis. So that's probably the first point of contact if you're interested in what the committee mission is and you want to find more out about the service. The other link I want to show you once you go to About APA and then Governance is this one here, Elections. This is the current call for a number of boards and committees. That's the one that closes in a couple of days. It's been open since December 15. And some other election opportunities will show up here on this page as well over time.
Awesome. So let's see if there's any, we don't have any additional questions here. So if people do, go ahead and shoot that out there. And I will just say one other place to get involved is the ECP committee that we have at Division 17. So it's 9 spots, and there are there's 2 to 3 people every, or not, I think we've now shifted it to 3, but it's 2 to 3 people every year that come on. And the application process is the same every year. We accept applications from April 15th to May 15th, and so you just submit that. You see that that's at the Division 17 website. So if you go to div17.org/ECP, you can find out all that information. And one really cool thing about that now is that as of the bylaws changed last year, the chair of this committee is actually a voting member on the executive board. And so that's one way that you show up at the table. Now you're at the midwinter meeting, you're at the executive meeting, you're part of that voting committee. And so, and every new person that comes in, your name gets put on the ballot for that. And then that goes out to the membership for a vote. So it is one really great way to kind of get involved. And also, once you've submitted that and let us know, we also often as the committee get asked when there are these appointments, are there any ECPs who want to serve that you know of? And we'll reach out to you and say, hey, is it okay if we forward your name for this sort of thing that matches your CV? So that is another kind of informal way that we try to do that. So April 15th, that application thing opens if you're interested in applying for the committee. With me, this is my last year on it, but yeah, there's a really wonderful committee of folks that try to do all that. So I don't know, any last thoughts that you have, Eddie?
I think getting the chance to serve is a really important one. I've been so lucky to know incredible early career psychologists and graduate students who have done amazing things at APA and in the divisions that I've been a part of. So I do hope that you'll take the opportunity to think about this and to reach out for advice. There is a lot of information out there and it can seem confusing, but if you can find somebody who's navigated it, find that person, latch on to them and ask for help along the way.
Yeah, and definitely reach out to our committee if you have questions. Our current chair is really committed to this. Dr. Hargans, who's the council rep, is also on the committee, so she's available. Lots of folks who are really happy. And Leandra Clark-Harvey was on our committee before, who is now on the board of directors when was on CECP. So a lot of folks getting very active from within the ECP committees.
Yeah. There's never been a shortage of counseling psychologists involved.
It's true. We do love that commitment to service.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie, and appreciate that. And if you all have questions, reach out after this, and we appreciate your time today and look forward to seeing you all active and involved.
All right. Take care.